The marathon at the 1904 St. Louis Olympics was like a really bad version of Wacky Races, just without the cars. Okay, so there was one car. The third Olympiad took place in St. Louis, Missouri during the summer of 1904. It was supposed to be in Chicago, but they were already having the World's Fair in St. Louis at the time, so they just had it there. The marathon was run on August 30th and included 32 participants from 4 countries: the US, Greece, Cuba, and South Africa. Now at this point, marathons weren't a set uniform length yet, so this one was 24.85 miles, rather than the normal 26 and change, but being shorter didn't make it any easier. The race began with 5 laps around the track inside the stadium, then the rest was over unpaved country roads, and if you're familiar with unpaved country roads in the middle of summer in the south, yeah, it was dusty. Plus the cars that the officials rode in along the way just kicked up more dust. Oh, and it was over 90 degrees when the race started. So we've got dirt roads covered in a fog of dust and over 90-degree heat. God only knows what the heat index was. Everything should be fine as long as everybody stays hydrated, right? Well, see, the guy in charge of organizing the Olympics, James E. Sullivan, decided that this would be a great time to conduct an experiment in purposeful dehydration. Yeah, that was a thing. And as such, only allowed 1 water station along the 24-mile stretch. Now, they were able to get water at a water tower and a well at around 6 and 12 miles, but still. Of the 32 runners that started the race, 14 finished. The first man to cross the finish line, notice I didn't say the winner, was Fred Lawrence, who had a time of 3 hours and 13 minutes. But here's the deal, he actually quit running the marathon about 9 miles in and was riding back to the stadium on a car when the car broke down. So he jogged the remaining 5 miles or so back to the stadium, but when he got there, the people saw him and started to cheer, so he just went with it. He openly admitted to it before they gave him a medal, so, you know, there's at least that. The winner was Thomas Hicks, but he had a little help too. See, he was helped by his 2 trainers who kept him up and going after the first 14 or so miles, first by physically keeping him off the ground, then by administering a concoction of raw eggs, rat poison, and brandy. By the way, this is the first case of doping in the Olympics, and it pretty much did the trick of keeping Hicks on his feet even as he was hallucinating, with his trainers carrying him over the last part of the race. Granted, he was kicking his legs the whole time as though he was still running on the ground, and he probably thought he was. And after he finished, he was luckily given medical attention because otherwise he would have died after losing 8 pounds during the race. But hey, you know, he won. Second and third place went to Albert Corey and Arthur Newton, I'm supposed to say respectively here, I think, who just ran the race. Nothing really odd there. But fourth place was Andarin Carvajal, a Cuban mailman and long-distance runner who had raised the money to go to the Olympics by running laps around the island. However, when he got to New Orleans, he lost all of the money gambling, so he had to hitchhike to St. Louis and showed up to the race in normal street clothes. Luckily, one of the other runners had a knife and they cut his pants into running shorts. He came in 4th even after stopping several times to talk to spectators, eating some bad apples, and then stopping to take a nap when he got cramps from said bad apples. Most of the men who couldn't finish required some form of medical attention, mostly from a combination of dehydration and inhaling too much dust. A few people almost died from it. Then we get to the 2 South African entrants, Lynn and Jan. Yeah, I'm not even trying to say those last names. Who were just in St. Louis for a different reason than racing. Well, kinda. We'll put a pin in that. Also, they were entered as Zulu because South Africa didn't exist until 1910, but they weren't even Zulu, they were Setswana. Anywho, they had been messengers during the Second Boer War, and though they ran most, if not all, of the race barefoot, they ended up finishing 9th and 12th. Though it was disappointing for Lynn, seeing as many thought he could possibly win the whole thing, except during the race, he was chased about a mile off course by some wild dogs. I promise you, I am not making any of this up. Oh, and pulling that pin from earlier, the reason Lynn and Jan were in St. Louis was because they were part of the Anthropology Days, which was where 1,400 indigenous peoples from around the globe were brought in and set up in exhibits that were meant to mimic their natural habitats in a human zoo. Yeah, we've talked about human zoos before. Another 1,600 were used throughout the rest of the exhibition area, showing off feats to entertain the spectators. Some of these were children from Canada's Indian residential schools to show how well they could be assimilated. Yeah, the schools where they're finding all the dead bodies buried, they were there too. And trying to end this on a somewhat positive note, it was the 1904 Olympics that introduced the whole gold, silver, and bronze medal for first, second, and third place thing. So, I mean, I guess something good came out of it.